Now that was awesome. Mamma mia. Welcome everybody. Health of Bali episode, as you know, the first Monday of every month. This is episode number 473, SpeakuP Monday, Destination Indonesia. And I think it's episode 39 in this Health Hub Bali series. So tonight is all about Mental Emotional Health Update 2025. And it's about Health Hub Bali, the Future of Health series. So we have some really wonderful guests, which I'm going to introduce. And then after, I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves because we can, but really interesting backgrounds. So really stay alert to the backgrounds, and obviously they have incredible information. So let's do a bit of an intro. Okay. So Dr. Jeremy, PhD, clinical psychologist and mental health expert for over 20 years in the UK, Middle East and Bali, with a speciality in eating disorders. Now, Dr. Jeremy offers the programs to restore balance that are intensive and integrative, and he is now also a teaching professor. Nikki, I was going to go for your surname. Nikki, right? A teacher, author, and wellness specialist supporting others to bloom. Now, Nikki's passion through transformational programs, retreats, and books for the past 35 years. Nikki has lived here in Indonesia. And obviously Tracy over here, the founder of Health Hub Bali, a pioneering health and wellness platform. Tracy, second, has a strong foundation in functional medicine and applied treatments, and has developed a dynamic health journeys that address root cause, creating the whole health model of care here in Bali. And obviously me, Robert Ian Bonnick, international speaker, author, advisor, tourism architect, founder of SpeakuP Monday and PT Carry Life Group, growth strategist and gateway to Indonesia, recognized by Forbes Business Council, Founder Institute, Ministry of Tourism and Creative Economy of Indonesia, Bali Tourism Promotion, and a #1 Bali Changemaker. But before we start, I just want to give you a bit of a frame around Health Hub Bali. So Health Hub Bali, connecting you to better health. This health tourism initiative for over a decade has been at the forefront of Bali health tourism and supported significant numbers of patients, practitioners, hospitals, government institutions, and continues to develop innovative health programs, making progress in developing the network of excellence. So please, another round of applause, everybody. Thank you so much. Okay, find my questions. Yes. So before, you know what, I think it'll be fun for them to introduce themselves, and then we'll get into what the takeaways will be. Because I think it's very nice for you to get to know the people first. So let's start, Nikki, let's start with you. You're sitting right next to me. So a little bit of your background and kind of how you found your way into the field that you are in now, and obviously to Indonesia. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So my name is Nikki Kasapian. I've been in Indonesia for at least 35 years, and 27 of that I've actually been living in Bali. I very first came to Bali in 1983 after I'd been rock climbing my way around Australia, and I stopped in Indonesia on my way back to the UK. I then returned to Indonesia as a teacher. So I was working in Jakarta for about 8 years, working with civil servants, professors who were going on to do masters and PhDs in Australia, the UK, or New Zealand. So I was a teacher for 18 years, and then I gradually got moved into the healing arts. So first of all, what happened for me was there was a relationship breakup, and I realized that I really needed to look at what was going on inside. And so I began my own personal journey of mental and emotional health, let's say, by doing personal development work and really coming to an integral place within myself. That then led me to go on to write a book, to do art exhibitions, to then start also doing mentoring and coaching for others, and doing very intensive immersions and one-on-one work with people. So that's how I've come to be doing what I now do.
One thing which I discovered earlier on, right? Can you let people know your, I don't know, is it parentage? National? I think it's very interesting.
Ethnicity, okay.
Ethnicity, yeah.
So I'm English, Irish, French, Armenian. And the name Kasapian is the Armenian side.
And just as you pass the microphone to our brother, Dr. Jeremy. So you can pass the microphone, yeah. It's stuck in the hand. That's what happens. The microphone gets stuck in the hand. It happens all the time. What's your ethnicity? I think that's also very interesting, and and the work that you've been doing, where you've been doing it, and also what brought you here to Bali. I think it's a very interesting story.
Right. So as I was saying before, I'm very excited to be here, and it's great. Always is a wonderful opportunity to speak about mental health with and share information to everyone, with everyone. So my background, I'm half English, half Lebanese, and so like Robert introduced, so I studied psychology. I've been in the field of mental health for more than 20 years, nearly close to 25 years. I studied until I did a PhD in the UK, and then I traveled to the Middle East, where I worked there for maybe 12 years across the Middle East, based mostly in Lebanon, but also kind of commuting in other countries there. And then I moved to Southeast Asia back in 2014, where I've been based here for about 9 years, and in the last 3 years I've been coming and going to other countries as well. So yeah, that's just a bit about myself.
One of the things which struck me about both of you, right? But just we're talking about you at the moment, is that when you look at a place like Lebanon, and we're talking about mental health, and we spoke a little bit about trauma before, that we're all in trauma of some description, but their trauma is real. So it'd be interesting tonight to kind of touch upon that, and maybe some of the similarities between people living in a place like Lebanon and also people living here in Bali, that for some people appears to be trauma-less, but I don't think really that's the case.
Yeah. All right, that's a really good question, because trauma is, can be exposed to trauma. It will all be exposed to something that, and how we're going to adapt or not adapt to something is going to determine, whether that trauma is going to be real impactful and it's going to affect our life in some way or another. But it's true that when you live in an environment that is very aggressive, seemingly aggressive at times, right? Because a lot of people will think of Lebanon because of what we see in the news, right? But then there's a lot of very, very toxic things can be happening anywhere. It could also be happening here in Bali. So it's not necessarily because it's Lebanon, what you hear of Lebanon, that it means, there's going to be perhaps more trauma than there is here. But that's, again, it obviously with exposure to intense problems, right? So there's trauma, and then there's how we deal with trauma and how we respond. But yeah. So,
thank you. And look, Tracy, you want to add to that? Sure.
Yeah, sorry, if I can, just to say that trauma we can see the really obvious trauma from war and from very violent and aggressive and uncertain places. And then there's trauma which is maybe more subtle. But to whoever is experiencing the trauma, it's relative and it's important for them, right? So I just want to address that of it may seem that there's not trauma going on, but if you've experienced it, whatever it is to you, that's really important. Yeah? So...
Yes. Absolutely. I think that for one person going through the same experience will be traumatic to one person and not necessarily to someone else. So it's a personal experience, and it's valid, right? Yeah.
Thank you. And Tracy, just to add, before I share what the takeaways for tonight will be, is there anything else you'd like to add to an intro to yourself, and maybe what the frame for tonight's episode is as well?
Yeah. First, I'd say thank you to everybody for joining us here tonight and online as well. Who am I? My name's Tracy. I'm here for more than a decade, and what we're weaving together is we call it like an ecosystem of the framework for real health, for the health seekers and vitality seekers that are coming to Bali, and also that we can seed something globally that people can really explore a journey of health that's evidence and science-based as well. But tonight's, I call it a conversation that matters. It's an update, mental and emotional health. It's a little bit different than the last, before COVID, I would say. There's lots of things coming up that are unprecedented. We may not have time, so we may have to do a follow-up on that. But today we'll create the framework for the subject as well.
Beautiful. So let's get started on our first takeaway. So what are the key elements of mental and emotional health? Jeremy, you have the mic. We start with you.
So the key
elements of mental and emotional health.
That's a very, very big question.
We only have big questions here, everyone. Have you noticed? Big questions, big type. You can probably read it from here, can't you? Yeah, I know. I need glasses. Thanks.
So I guess feeling as a human being, right? I say that you're feeling a sense of good safety, a sense of self-worth that makes you feel comfortable in yourself, that you can thrive. Emotional means that you can adapt to various situations, that you've got a good emotional vocabulary, that you can express emotions, but you can also sit with emotions, you can understand them. A lot of people experience emotions but are not comfortable with emotions, right? So so really having a good ability to develop resilience as well. So I guess that's how I would discuss this, really. Yeah.
Nikki, would you care to add to? I can repeat the question if you like.
Yes, please.
Yeah, sure. So what are the key elements of mental and emotional health?
Okay, so I think how I'd respond to that is again, agreeing with Jeremy, is that it's the connection actually that you have with yourself that is also key to your mental and emotional health. And when we are disconnected from who we are, and in that sense also disconnected from being willing to sit with our emotions or to allow them to move through us, and to have a good relationship with ourselves, if we don't have that, then we're coming into that space of kind of wobbly mental and emotional health. So many things impact upon that, including diet, including self-talk, including within self-talk, the stories. There's a storyteller here, the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves, and the environment in which we find ourselves or in which we've grown up in. All of those will impact upon our mental and emotional health. And what's good for one person isn't necessarily good for another.
Now, keep in mind, while Tracy's about to respond, now, this section may not go deep as you want it to, and that's the reason why we have questions, right? So if you have questions that come up, write them down, will be my suggestion to you. And then when the question time comes, raise your hand, ask your question. If it's really, really personal and you don't want the world to know it and you don't want to be online while you're asking the question, then just see one of the people here afterwards, okay? And you can do it privately. Tracy, just over to you.
Okay, so when we're talking mental, we've got two different things. One is mental health, one is emotional health. When we talked about before about the medical side and the balance, we could have, that's more psychiatry. Yes? That's another question. But it's mainly about connection with ourselves. So who are we? So for the health seekers that are coming to Bali, often they're seeking, there's something missing in their life. And so when we get people, say suicide people, whatever, they wonder what life is about. So what we're talking about is coming back to balance, that people are whole, they feel safe inside themselves, and the stories we're talking about could have been triggered from when they're little, and it's still playing out. They could be they're 50 but they're acting like a 5-year-old in their responses. So the resilience, and in the school systems already now, I know in Australia they talk about resilience with the children, that they learn to deal with issues. Some have never learnt that for whichever era they've grown up in. So then what tools are available here in Bali, like say with Dr. Jeremy over the years, and the retreats would give them tools on how in human behaviour and recognising and raising awareness so they can own it and then make a choice how to live. That's one aspect of this. Yeah?
You know, what might be interesting...
But it's mainly connecting to themselves.
Okay.
Who are they really? Because often they're overcompensating behaviour. They've never been introduced to themselves.
Yeah. You know, one of the things here is we have this audience, right? People watching and people here in person. And I know it's a very difficult thing to ask, but I'm going to ask it anyway. You know, maybe both of you, Jeremy and Nikki, you know, what comes up first? Not like a long case study, but a way of explaining perhaps what's come up in the patients that you've been seeing over the years, and what maybe one thing, I know it's not one thing, but which aspect of the solution was that one thing. So in other words, what we're looking for is a takeaway for the audience that they might hear themselves in your story and might say, you know what, I could go home and I could try that myself. So, and it might be diet related, it might be something else. But just from your, again, I see Lebanon, I see Bali, I see the UK. So I see a lot of information inside that beautiful mind of yours. And just trying to give something to the audience here that they can take away with them, a story that might connect with them, and something that they can do that will help to ease their situation.
So...
Think about it. Yeah.
So often the people that come and see me, or that I've seen over the years, are very much disconnected from themselves. They have a low self-worth, or they're stuck in their life at various extent, to various degrees, and many will be very afraid to actually make the first step to actually come and speak with someone. And the reason for that is simply because they're carrying a lot of stigma, a lot of perhaps misconceptions, and those are barriers. When we carry all these barriers, they act as obstacles for a process of healing, right? So I guess that the moment you're able to take that step and override the narrative, see, and that's not an easy thing to do. When I say the narrative, it's the stories that you're holding in your mind, that you're repeating to yourself, that the majority of the time you don't know you're doing. So that's why we're in pain, that's why we're hurting, right? So part of the process would be to give yourself a chance to challenge, to confront and face your fear. That means what's the obstacles, what's blocking you from actually seeking help, because that's the first step. When you do that and you can confront and face your fear, then you're able to speak up. And I think that's one element. Now, working with lots of other people, for example, who are struggling with all forms of compensatory behaviors. That's a form of adaptation or maladaptation. We're trying to do our best to survive. We're trying to do our best to heal. But we're using these different modalities to do that, especially, for example, if you speak with someone who is restricting, or someone who is binging, or turning to food as a way to cope with life, with their emotions, who are very cut off from their emotions. They have what we call coping deficits, or their mood intolerance, meaning it's very difficult for them to cope or to sit with their emotions. So these are all expressions of pain and hurt. So the first step, I would say, is take a risk to speak with someone that you can feel that you can trust, I guess.
Thank you. And Nikki, what comes up for you? I can see the mind turning.
Yeah, so for me, with the many people that I've worked with over the last 20, 25 years, is it stems from the relationship that we have with ourselves. As Dr. Jeremy was saying, low self-esteem plays a huge part in mental and emotional health, as does the disease to please. And the strategies that we learn when we're very small, which for a long time they're a way of surviving. It's a coping mechanism, be that overcompensation, be that trying to keep the peace. And it can then change form and morph into eating disorders, for example, or to other forms of addiction and increasing disconnection from who we are. So for me, it's about cultivating a relationship with yourself. It's about cultivating a daily practice where you can actually connect and sit and be with yourself, even if it's only for 5 minutes, or even if you only start with 2 minutes, just so you check in with yourself. You keep coming back to yourself, which is basically coming back to your heart and to your ground. And once you can start doing that, and you develop, some people develop a meditation practice or other practices. Some people do it through breath work. There's many different modalities. For me, I actually go with silent, just sitting, and literally just sitting, even if you're bored, just sitting. But to be able to just sit starts to change things. So that might be a takeaway for some people.
Thank you. Tracy, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, just sometimes before we go down the route of these behavioural things, it can be something that's functional. Meaning that at the chemistry, we know, say, Dr. Amen's work in US, where they use the SPECT scan on the brain, some of the biggest influencers in the world, they actually had some form of ADD, or they were brilliant, but there was something imbalanced. They didn't even have that actual label. But with a little supplement, because we're minerals and we're water. So with things being out of balance, something could be overworking in the brain, and they've got scans to check this. So that's one way. It could be the gut health. That's why we look through all these different systems first. The thoughts, feelings, emotions, then create the hormones, so that we're being driven by something else. So by addressing that and being explained by a professional as well, and then getting tools, we can reverse engineer.
Beautiful. Current issues here in Indonesia, what are they? From this mental and emotional health perspective.
Sorry, so I was actually checking in with some of my Indonesian and Balinese friends and asking them, because I was thinking initially around eating disorders or around the influence of social media. And as I was speaking to some of my friends, they were saying that yes, there has been an increase now from one generation to the other of how people view themselves. So I think that's a really big part of the mental and emotional self-perception that has shifted in the time that I've been in Indonesia. And most people will go for family support first. They won't necessarily go out to find a doctor or find a therapist. They'll actually try and work within the family and have the family help to down-regulate what's going on, which, that can be 50-50, because sometimes the issue is actually coming from the family. So the increasing disconnection through social media, disconnection from the land, and disconnection from their peers, and social pressure, peer pressure, is having a really big impact on young Balinese, and I think on Indonesians also, the whole of Indonesia. So
Yeah, I would completely agree with with everything you said. I think that Indonesia as a whole is exposed to maybe not totally as a whole, but in some parts of Indonesia, like Java, Jakarta, perhaps Bali especially, just seeing what the Balinese and the Indonesians are being exposed to in terms of the development. very quick development. It's causing a lot of stress, a lot of mental health issues. But there's also something about the culture is that there's a lot of stigma around mental health. They don't talk about it, right? So everything is very much hidden. Something that we see across in other cultures as well. So yes, as you mentioned, they will try to manage and discuss this internally within the family. But sometimes there's also a lot of shame around actually talking and speaking out around mental health in general. So the people who are affected then end up suffering even more, or end up being cast on the side. So which is a major issue, which can then lead to a range of mental health issues. I think that in the last few years, for example, just as an example, cases of suicide have been on the increase than ever before. And also we're seeing a rise of many other mental health conditions across the board in terms of all mental health in general, not just like eating disorders, but addictions and many other issues as well. But the level of care and the level of intervention and treatment still is quite limited, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you. Tracy, anything you'd like to add to that? Or?
No, I'm just listening. I'm listening. Yeah. So here in Indonesia, I think it's probably what's happening in the mind and comparing. We're living in a different time for Indonesia. We're talking about through history the colonialism that's been here for centuries, and now suddenly with the independence, it's about them. So it's not about copying the West. It's about them getting back to their own roots. So that's through the fourth largest country in the world. We're talking about that. If we're talking about Bali, we're talking about the pressure of the West here and the children seeing what the foreigners have, etc., and then living in a different system. That's tough, and that applies to all little islands through the world where children have been educated overseas and come back home. That's a big issue.
You know, I feel that there's questions, right? So in about 3 minutes, we're going to go to some questions. So one group, they've been on the show 5 times over the last 3-4 years. Bali Bersama Bisa, YM Bim Bim, Dwayne, and Nev. The first mental health hotline in Indonesia, right? And again, I think 3 or 4 interviews with these guys, they're friends as well. It's phenomenal what's happening out there. On the next episode, I'm sure they're going to be here on the panel. But it's not just, Indonesians. It's not just expats. They were all calling this line thousands and thousands every single day. You know, so it's again, we speak about expat, we speak about Balinese, we speak about Indonesian at large. These calls are coming in from throughout Indonesia, the 4th most populous country on earth. Right, so it's definitely something which is needed. But just before we go to questions, we spoke about food a few times, and I think that's one of the big disorders. Right, so maybe if we can scratch a bit deeper into that, why is that such a huge challenge for people? Why is it that people turn to food? Possibly more than anything else, if that's true.
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, our relationship with food is a very complex one. There's so many factors that are involved. So the fact, first of all, that we are emotional beings, so we will have an emotional relationship to food, not just a physical need in that sense. So the thing is, the difference between food and things like alcohol or substances is that those aren't something that we need, whereas food is something that we need. And because we're emotional beings, then we're always going to we will have an emotional relationship to food to some extent. So either it's going to be adapted or it's not going to be adapted. So when we begin to use food to manage our emotions or not deal with certain emotions, that's when it becomes a disorder.
How do we know? So I have friends here, right? Not necessarily here in the audience, don't want to point them out, which have food challenges, right? But, you know, don't try this at home, by the way. And I don't know who even started this about, you know, like a frog boils, you know, the water warms up slowly and then it gets hotter and you don't realize until it's too late. Not a great analogy, but it gets the point across. So how do people which are entrapped, enmeshed within this challenge of food and using it in that way, how do they possibly diagnose that I have a problem with food, that now it's become an addiction, now it's become a problem? Because most of the time I don't see how people could actually do that, right? Because you're enmeshed in the process.
Right. That's a very good question. Well, the person who's very preoccupied, who's always thinking about food, who has a poor image of themselves, poor body image, and they don't like their shape as well or their height, and ends up also being someone who's quite perfectionist as well. Then usually will be someone who may have some kind of an eating disorder.
And how do you begin, or how do they begin to break that cycle? Now, you said before about the first step is the first step, raising your hand, asking for help, right? So, but move past that so we don't repeat what we said already. Like, yes, just in your experience, you know, like people may be here, maybe they know someone here who's impacted by this. And it's very difficult because I know it's a complex problem. It's not one thing, right? I respect that. But in a way, I'm still going to ask you, you know, like, is there something that they can do to help themselves, if it's them, or someone that they know, to basically seek help outside of the put your hand up and say, I need help, because they don't realize that.
Right, absolutely. Well, you know, that's a very good point. First of all, someone who's trapped in the cycle of an eating disorder isn't doing this on purpose, right? And they can't just choose to stop. They can't stop. So telling them to stop isn't really going to help the solution, the problem. Being informed, knowing that this is something that can happen to anyone, and that you want them to feel safe and comfortable to speak to you as well. But I think that if you do know someone who's struggling with something like that, then I guess it's just to be there with them and to make them feel at ease that maybe it might be okay to actually reach out and to speak with someone about it, or just to get more information about it. Simply because someone who's trapped in an eating disorder has a lot of ambivalence about change, right? They're very afraid of change simply because maybe the behavior is serving a purpose for them, even though it's affecting their life. And then there's a part of them that wants to stop doing what they're doing, but they're stuck with it because that's how they're managing their life. So yeah.
Nikki, what comes up for you, Lil?
Thank you. I agree with a lot of what you've just been saying, Jeremy. And it's also, I think, sometimes it's a form of control. It's where people do actually still have control within their lives. I think also the other thing is that there's a few new drugs on the market, Ozempic being one, and the power of that, and through, again, coming back to social media, has been intense. And so if anyone has a friend who at the moment is using that in order to lose weight, but you feel they're going too far, all you can do is keep talking to them and support them in already realizing how fabulous they already look. They don't need to go any further, and try, whatever you can do without being a bully or taking over, but to guide somebody, to support them, to help them to get help, I think is what comes up for me, because it's about you seeing and then helping them to reconnect with themselves and step back a little bit. That's all I can think of.
Thank you. Tracy?
Yeah, so probably finding out why, because there's all different reasons first. And when I was talking to Dr. Jeremy, I thought of those pictures, sometimes on social media, it's got like a really big person, but inside it's all chiseled out and there's a little person inside. So it's what are they seeing themselves? We have had some movies in the past like that. So it gets back to that connection, something they may never have had, and that's why we're saying wake up and live in Bali. They were the retreats that we had running before.
Now look, questions. Now just before we go to questions, raise your hand. Guzman, we've got the fourth mic here. And it's all ready to go. Okay, so we got some questions over here, but just to bring everybody back to speed. So today, we are talking about mental and emotional update 2025. 3 illustrious guests, starting with Nikki, a teacher, author, and wellness specialist supporting others to bloom is Nikki's passion through her transformational programs, retreats, and books. For the past 35 years, Nikki also lives here in Indonesia. And Dr. Jeremy, clinical psychologist and mental health expert for over 20 years in the UK, Middle East, and Bali, with a speciality in eating disorders. And Dr. Jeremy offers programs to restore balance that are intensive and integrative. And he is now a teaching professor. And obviously Tracy over here, founder of Health Hub Bali, a pioneering health and wellness platform. And Tracy has a strong foundation in functional medicine and applied treatments, and has developed dynamic health journeys that address, turn the page, mental, wrong one, that was close, root cause, creating a whole health model of care here in Bali. So, you have questions. What I recommend you do, the mic is over there, yeah? The mic's there, somewhere? Yeah, Guzman, just put the mic over there somewhere, yeah. So, with the story, pre-story, with respect, if you can make that as to the point as possible, because if it's like a 5-minute backstory, we're not going to get through many people. So if you can kind of a bit of background and then ask your question, then we can get through more and give more value. Over to you, Carol.
So I work with men because I realize how them not being able to express their emotion is really stopping them from loving in a functional way. And I know that many men spend their entire life not being able to express their emotions. So what made you, Jeremy, and that's the question that is for you, what made you realize that you needed to express your emotion and the emotion that you feel as a man? What happened to give you that urge and that awareness to actually make it your work, your purpose?
Thank you for the question. I think I was always drawn to kind of this level of sensitivity. And I was always very curious to know and understand the human mind. So it really started from an existential place and a deep curiosity to understand myself, that then very early on led me to mindfulness, meditation, whereas everybody else my age at the time were doing completely different things. So I think it was just more of something that came quite intuitively for me in that sense, and that's helped me a lot through my experiences and life challenges as I grew up, because obviously I faced life and I'm a human being, so I'm living challenges and experiences, and I think that's just allowed me as a tool, or this sensitivity has allowed me to help process things in that sense. So thank you.
Beautiful, thank you. If I have another question to the ladies.
Yeah, so what we'll do, again,
okay,
to make it quick, you're allowed a follow-up question if it's really important, yeah? But that's it after that, yeah.
Okay, we've talked about food, but we haven't talked about hormones. I'm out of the menopause, and I know how emotionally screwed up I was during that time. So what is the role that hormones play in emotional balancing, and would you advise anyone who feels that they are emotionally disconnected or really struggling to actually do a hormonal test?
Hormonal test.
Hormonal test, right?
Yeah.
Do you want to take this one, Tracy? Okay, so I would say it's not going to do any harm to do a hormonal test, right? So if you're in perimenopause and you're finding that it's very, very challenging, then I would say definitely it's worthwhile going to get your physiological...
I think for everyone, I'm talking about men and women, and regardless of the age. Because hormone balancing and emotional balancing, I think, are very related.
Yeah, very much so. because that's the biological and the physiological impact, right? So of course that needs to be checked. So yeah, the answer is yes.
Yeah. Okay. So what we're looking at is baselines, and this is part of getting to know who you are. So sometimes it's a bit confronting to look at behaviour and life experiences and trauma, but we can look at what's happening actually in our biology. So when we look at whether it's a teenager or a child, we can track things through life, and then when we see the imbalances, we get some expert or professional to have a look, and then we look at why. Is it coming from thoughts, feelings, emotions? Is it actually a chemical imbalance? And we can start mapping out something for better health.
Thank you for the first question, Carol.
On that note, I would just like to say that absolutely hormones is everything, right? And we have so many different hormones that are affecting us, and the relationship between, for example, food and our mood is unquestionable. So that's when people have we have hunger hormones, we have satiety hormones, not just one of each. We have multiple hormones that are affecting our appetite and our feelings of fullness. And when those are disrupted, it's going to have a total impact on the whole of our whole system. We also have hormones that regulate our moods, but they're also impacted by what we eat or what we don't eat in our gut. And so we talk about the gut-brain axis. Perhaps some colleagues are going to think of the first brain being the gut more than the actual brain. So there's a lot of fascinating work that's being done, a really important work. And so we would need to heal is to regulate these hormones and to do so at an individual level. So it isn't like a program that suits all. No, we need to really treat a person as a person, because everybody's physiologically different. Even if we talk about the same, the same aspects of the body, that makes sense. So yes, women and men are equally impacted. Yeah.
Thank you. Next question.
Hi, everyone.
It's on. Don't touch it. It's on.
So, Robert, first of all, I know this is really close to your heart about mental health, and I know this is why you founded Speak Up Mondays, because of your friends who passed away committing suicide. So this is a really important one, and I have so many questions about mental health because I'm really curious and passionate about it, as I had been diagnosed with depression and anxiety before. My question is about social media, globalization, and cultural integration. In a place like Bali, how do we recognize trauma? That's one. How do we connect with ourselves in a society that's so connected but so disconnected at the same time? That's two.
So just hold it there.
Yeah.
Let them answer those two, and then we'll come back to you. Okay? Yeah. So Jeremy, yep.
So I'll talk a little bit about social media. So I'm part of a group that was set up in the UK called Health Professionals for Safer Screens, and we are a group of growing professionals with a real concern for level of screen use in children and social media. So it's not just social media; it's also screen use and the impact that small kids are being given screens so early, and how that's actually impacting the brain, and it's impacting how they then emotionally develop, because now they're no longer turning towards a human contact to get to regulate their emotions. They're turning to screens because mom and dad are also on their screens. So it's creating such a disconnect that is insane. And we're part of this movement in the UK is trying to lobby towards taking certain measures to create more safety. How? Maybe by first having parents be more aware of the dangers, to be more informed, and perhaps not allow phones or tablets or so on, screens, to be in the hands of their toddlers, even toddlers, right? That you don't want to spend time with them, or maybe you can't spend time with them because you've got to be at work, or there's so many different reasons for that. But still, we need to be more careful about these things. The second thing is social media. There isn't no prohibition around this. I know that there's a law that was passed in Australia, and I think that's a fantastic step forward with that, where they ban social media for under 16s. That's already a big step, and I think that we need to be taking more action towards that. Don't know where we are, at least in the UK, when it comes to this, but definitely. So the connection between social media, mental health, and screen use and mental health is definitely undeniable, and some drastic measures have to be taken. It's impacting everyone. Even here, we're talking about it in Bali, and how, you know, even the culture here, everybody has their phones, and everybody's on the phone looking at social media and how it's impacting how you feel about yourself, and the levels of anxieties are off the roof.
Nikki, you wanted to deal with one. Yep.
Yeah, the second question, which was about how you can start basically reconnecting to yourself
And recognizing trauma.
and recognizing trauma. Okay, so what I would recommend in that situation is, for recognizing trauma, is you would be well advised to work with a professional. And in terms of reconnecting to yourself, as you reconnect to yourself, having been so disconnected, then those things are highly likely to arise as you reconnect with yourself, because when we disconnect, we're trying to numb what it is that we've been feeling very often or have experienced. And again, I would recommend getting professional assistance and professional help.
Thank you. All right. So I know you're going to go there as well. So, yep. Elvina, yeah.
Okay. Hello? Okay. I have a question. So I work with, also in mental health, basically work facilitating for breathwork, so dealing with trauma and things. So I want to know about this, especially eating disorder, because, for example, like binge eating, before this person go into the binge, they will having a trigger and then start to feeling anxious, not just anxious, but quite extremely anxious, that they need to cover it up with something, right? There is that one thin slice of moment to decide to take it or to control themselves. And in this moment, it's so difficult for them not to do it. And then they end up coming up to the professionals, like, oh, maybe friends, and calling, oh, I'm mess it up. I'll mess it up again. So in that anxious moment, so I have this friends, less clients that already do meditation, all the self-awareness, but just to deal with that slight moment, not to take that food or binge into that food in that extremely anxious moment. And do you have any practical way or advice to deal with this? Anyone?
That's a great question.
Yes.
Yeah. I would say, because as I was saying earlier, there's a complex interplay at work when a person is binging, or if they are in a binge cycle, right? Or if we're talking about a binge purge cycle, or if we're just binge, the person is not necessarily aware that they're anxious, right? But the binge is something that comes up for them as the solution for them to go towards. So how to work around this is, we need to work on a physiological level, and just telling them to do some meditation or some breath work is not really going to work, because you need to regulate their physiology first. So first, we need to go through a nutritional rehabilitation so that the person understands how their body is reacting in that moment. So we need to see what level of deficiency that they have, and to relearn how to nourish themselves. In parallel, it's what we call a parallel track intervention, to work on the psychological side and learn new tools and new ways of regulation, or regulating or managing their stress, building new avenues of habits and assessing their lifestyle. So it's very difficult to give just a one word solution to this. Why? Because it's complex, and we need to look at it from a physiological perspective, but we also need to look at it from a complex psychological behavioral perspective as well. So meditation at the beginning of a treatment like that, or a beginning of a process, won't do really much, because there's a physiological imbalance with a deep hormonal imbalance that's causing the person to have to go back to the same behavior. So that's what we need to target. We need to regulate that in parallel to doing all the other aspects and elements of the work.
Yep.
Thank you so much for your answer. May I ask just a little bit more? So, with that anxious moment right there before they take that food, do you have any practical way of to resist or say no right in that moment?
That's great. So we will be doing what we call flexibility training. Flexibility work will be do it differently. So to break the habit, so to break what we call the behavioral chain of the behavior. So as I said, it's not just one thing. We need to come in from like different angles. But for example, a person who's noticing that they're having the urge to actually turn towards the binge, just to see if they can delay it first. Instead of doing it straight away, let's see if they can not do it for 15 seconds. Or if they're going to not do it, then do it like maybe after a minute. But they cannot stop doing it if they don't have something else to replace it with, or if they're not understanding the complexity that's happening inside of them that needs to be looked at, if that makes sense. But flexibility work and noticing what's happening in their body first is a first step. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your answer.
You're welcome.
I mean, if you pass the microphone forward, you can finish off if you want. Yeah.
Yes, and of course integrating breath work and other stress management techniques, but in parallel to the kind of the nutritional re-nourishment process as well. Otherwise, it's going to fail, and if it fails, then that's going to be an experience that's going to reinforce the problem even more. So even though we're coming in with a good intention by telling them do some meditation, breathe, connect with your emotion, it's okay, it's safe, but not working on all the complexity, without the real knowledge, we might actually be doing more harm for the person long term, with all our best of intention. Yeah.
The other thing that's really important is to remember it's a journey. It's not like the quick fix. So you're developing and cultivating the muscle. In as Jeremy's talking about, like to build in those strategies, you're developing a muscle, you're developing a technique, and that's going to be really helpful to that person.
Great question, great answers. Next question. Yeah. It's on. Yeah, just give me a moment. Guz?
So I wanted to ask you just a question since the very beginning.
No, it's not on. You may have switched it off. Just hand it back to Guz, and he'll sort it out. Yeah, if you just pass it to him. Yeah. There you go. You're on. Almost on. Graham, you had something? Good. Double checking. All right, so while we adjust the mics here, so just remember, if you have any questions, we're going to make our way towards this direction. Just raise your hand. Yes, we're ready to go?
I wanted to ask you a question since the very beginning, because for me...
a little bit close to my darling, a little bit close to your mouth.
I'm a psychologist and a Chinese medicine doctor, and for me... I'm really, my question is, do you really think that in 2025 it really makes really sense to still make a difference between mental health, emotional health and physical health? Do you still really think it makes sense still to keep on with this dividing them? Because both Chinese medicine and Ayurveda since 5,000 years, they all said that we are one. Health is one. So I don't believe I can be mentally balanced or if I'm emotionally balanced if my body has a disease. And then and the same for the others. So it's like, so this is my first question. And the other one, now I'm really diving into the nervous system rewire.
Let's just do one question at a time.
No, it's together.
Together?
I'm diving in with the nervous system rewire, and I think it's super interesting because, again, for Chinese medicine, mind and emotion are the same, ruled by the fire element. And so it's like, so my nervous system doesn't really care to understand about the trauma. My nervous system cares about feeling safe. So this is embodied healing. And so this, for me, it's what really makes sense. So I'm just curious about knowing your opinion.
I think it's. I very much agree with what you're saying. I think just the vocabulary means that we are using different words, but to explain the different aspects of what's actually going on. So, you know, the mental health, the physical health, and then the aspects of mental health and emotional health. But yes, overall, all in all, it's all one health, right? It's just for the sake of understanding those different aspects. Then we will talk about it like this, or at least I'll talk about it in this way. So we need to be integrating all the various elements and aspects.
I'm
together.
asking your opinion. I mean, we can still play with words, but do you really believe they are separate?
No, of course not. They're all integrated. They all serve a one purpose, to be able to, well, live a human experience, right? And hopefully to be able to live a human experience in a way that is fulfilling and that we can heal, right? So that's my take. Would you like to say something?
I would say something very similar. It's all interconnected.
But
Tracy?
And I'll say something to you. This is a whole health model, what Health Hub has got. Okay. The normal training is what we call Cartesian. That's what's in the universities the last 60, 70 years. We're coming out of that in 2025. And that's why we're talking, say, even the rehabs here, we've got like, they've got psychologists there, they're going from whichever psychotherapy they are, but they're not looking at gut health. All right, so that's why they're calling out to Health Hub saying, do you have a gut specialist? And think they can work it separately. So the doctors and medics that you see on these panels, they're the whole health model. So what we have, say, Dr. Jeremy, underneath his slogan is the unconventional psychologist.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, because we're looking at whole health. It's a whole health journey. But where you've got the brain and you've got the mind, that's different things as well. We're also dealing with the body. So in the triage model of medicine, we've got medicine, health, and then wellness. So sometimes we've got to, because the sake of the way the world systems are set up in their health departments, we've got to deal like that. So that's where we integrate, and we have navigators that can guide them. But somebody who's trained in, say, Ayurvedic or the Chinese medicine, that's a whole thing. Or Sadha's the same, what Bali's got. So when we've had the Balinese doctors here, we're talking whole health, getting very grounded, very connected, and coming from the heart. But if there's a pathogen in the body, we're talking, virus, fungus, mold, parasites, or some bacteria, we have to address it from a certain model as well. But also in 2025, we're looking at what is causing it. Are our thoughts, feelings, and emotions causing this in the gut health? What's causing it? So that's where the whole health, what you're saying, we're not separating it now. They're the conversations we're having here in Bali.
All right, so we can pass the microphone forward. Thank you for your question. Next question.
Okay, so I wanted to ask a question about, I feel like a lot of people, in their early 20s, I have conversations with them, and they always feel very lost sometimes, because I think emotion regulation is very important, but sometimes, living life, there's work, there's personal, social, there's mental health, emotional health, all that you all mentioned, And there are times where you feel very overwhelmed, and when you feel very overwhelmed, everything is very blurry. You know when you want to come back and tap and reflect on yourself, like, okay, am I okay? Like, is my well-being okay? You need moments like that to sit like with yourself. But sometimes you come into an environment, and I personally feel like right now I'm a little bit overwhelmed. Like Bali, it's like everything's happening all the time. I wake up, there's always something going on every single day. And how would you advise someone to in chaos find peace, and to kind of like tap into that, to like really like, okay, let's figure out what's happening when there's so much chaos happening. It's a good chaos, but you still need to regulate yourself and find out like what's really happening, you know? And how can you find out if there's so much things happening that you cannot find the root cause? So yeah.
So thanks for that question. And going back to something that I said earlier, the importance of cultivating a relationship with yourself, and of cultivating a practice, a morning practice, where when you get up, you don't straight go into an activity, but you actually ground. It's like it's about coming back into your body. And there's lots of different modalities out there, but sometimes some of the most simple practices of just standing on the ground barefoot and just feeling something is going to help you come back into your body. Because often what happens, I think, when there's so much going on, is we can start checking out, and we're not as grounded. So that would be one thing that I would recommend for people when they start feeling overwhelmed.
Thank you.
So we will all be overwhelmed for different reasons. So we would first need to understand what is the reason you're being overwhelmed, right? So also we would need to have that chance to probably be able to talk about this. A person who's overwhelmed maybe doesn't know that they're overwhelmed, so they don't have the information, right? So again, we need to maybe get the information. So if we're talking about it now, and that might actually be useful, then what was just shared will be applicable, and you'll probably do it. But at first, if you're not aware, you're overwhelmed. And we can all get overwhelmed. We're all sometimes overwhelmed, and that's okay. But to get to a place where you can actually begin to say, "Oh, it's okay if I'm actually overwhelmed." So I've already developed a different type of self-care based on the information I have, right? But then a lot of people are not informed, so then their overwhelm ends up going into a full-blown panic attack, right? And then they get really, really stuck, and then maybe they get depressed, right? And they get stuck in this vicious circle. So having a routine, exactly as was mentioned, is definitely the way to go. I guess maybe, you know, how can we transmit this information to people? How can people be more usefully informed? Okay, and I guess that's the tricky part when we're talking about social media, right? Because there is a good side to it, but there's a lot of really toxic stuff that's out there, right? But if we could use it to communicate things better, then more people will be positively impacted. And that question that actually concerns so many people that you have about being overwhelmed, people will then be able to get the right advice to know how to handle it, you know? Or you can turn to somebody that you care, or that can support you. Maybe you have a good support network, or hopefully you do, right? That you can actually speak to, and then yes, to get the right guidance and the right routine. Yeah.
Thank you for your question. Now over here, any questions? It's been over here a lot, so we'll just start here. Yeah, with Graham, and then we'll go behind you. We've got time for another 3 or 4 more questions.
This goes to the points made by the ladies over here about depression and anxiety. And basically, I was diagnosed about 25 years ago, bipolar. I went on a very long journey to understand that. The past 7 years, I've been able to balance it totally. And I honor what these guys are talking about, because daily practice is the essence. I've found for myself that daily practice is the essence, and I've done a lot of research, and just about every single successful, balanced person seems to have a morning practice. And I'd love it if you can elaborate, all three of you can elaborate on your relationship and how you put that across to clients, because in my journey I was never told about daily practice, and it's just beautiful to now hear that people are talking about daily practice. So I'd love to hear your points on daily practice.
So I would say I'll talk about my daily practice, and it's definitely, that's where it all stems.
I suppose the more important thing, how do you put that across to clients?
That's a good way. I mean, it's always going to be personalized, and it can be as a suggestion, right? So this is what I suggest that you could maybe test and see how it goes if you were to wake up in the morning and just do a basic breathing exercise. So I'll be teaching them a very simple basic exercise that they can begin to apply. And of course, other little routines. It could be the breath work, grounding, then introduction into meditation. Some people don't know how to meditate, or it's too overwhelming, or that they think that they cannot meditate. They don't know how to meditate. So grounding is a wonderful tool and that can be taught quite rapidly. And it's a bit like a prerequisite to meditation. And I'll explain what the difference is. So grounding brings a person into the present. Meditating is actually being in the present. And being in the present means being able just to be with whatever it is in the moment. So we are beings that always have thoughts. So we're always going to be thinking. So I'll very often hear, if I do use the word meditation, or maybe another word like, let's say, mindfulness, people will often say, "Oh, I can't do that. I don't know how to empty my mind." So a lot of misconceptions about it. So I would guide them through a grounding meditation, a grounded practice. There's something really useful called the 5-4-3-2-1. Don't know if you're familiar with that. 5-4-3-2-1, and that's using your senses. Using your senses to come into the present. It could be as simple as breathing. If you bring your attention to your breath, you will be grounded. If you use other senses, you can also be grounded as well. So 5-4-3-2-1 will go as, for example, let's focus on 5 things that your eyes can see, and spend a little while on whatever your mind, your eyes is paying attention to right now in this moment. Look at the details of what you don't typically notice of that specific point. Let's notice the shape, the color, the geometry, everything about it for a little while. And then you do this with other objects. Then 4 things that you can hear. Then 3 things that you can touch. Then 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. Automatically, when you go through this and you guide the person through this process, it becomes very experiential. And you took your time to do it. This is not like, I'll do it 5-4-3-2-1 this quick. No, I can do this for maybe 20 minutes. And the person suddenly feels very grounded and said, whoa, this worked. Maybe for the first time in their life, wow, this worked. Person who was always couldn't respond, suddenly that worked for them. Said, okay, I can do that. And the thing is that they often will do it, and they feel definitely much better. And then they incorporate it in their practice. This then leads them to a deeper curiosity, perhaps, or a deeper curiosity that leads to a deeper ability to practice things like meditation. That's just being in the present. But there's many ways to meditate, to learn to meditate, to have a focal point, as opposed to just being in that total presence. That's a deeper level of experience that's very difficult to transmit to someone who's never had that experience. It's similar to a diver, right? I mean, you can't just go, have someone just go dive to 50 meters if they haven't gone through the basics first.
So Nikki, any morning routine? Thank you, by the way.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that 5-4-3-2-1, which is great, because that's definitely a way. What you want to do is you want to be in the body first as much as you can. But there are, and so that's a really, really good place to start. And then so how do I introduce that to people that I meet, or work with over time is often it comes up as a question. People might say to me, so what do you do in the mornings when you get up, Nikki? Like, how come you get up so early? And so then I would share what my morning practice is, which involves sitting and walking. So I use both, let's say 20 minutes of sitting and 10 minutes of walking. And it's a classical shamatha vipassana practice. But in order to get there, you're exercising a muscle. So you don't start off at 20 minutes and 10 minutes. You start off at maybe 1 or 2 minutes. And it's also, again, as Jeremy was saying, like some people get very overwhelmed by meditation. And they say, but I can't do that. And so what I try to do is ask people, so when you're at the gym, for example, and you're on the treadmill, are you on the treadmill and on your phone? And they'll be like, uh-huh. And I'm like, okay. And so when you're washing dishes, for example, are you just really focused on washing the dish, or are you doing something else? Like, oh, well, I'm thinking about what I'm going to have tomorrow, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, okay, if you could just be with washing whatever you're washing, that's already meditation. So sometimes we make meditation into something very abstract and really huge. And then because we can't sit there with an empty mind, which very, very rarely happens, by the way, most of the time you're watching your thoughts go by like a leaf going down a river. It just depends whether you want to jump into the river and get hold of the leaf, and then you've gone away with the leaf. So then you bring yourself back to, oh, yeah, I can leave the leaf there and just come back here to me. So those are some of the little things that I would share with people to assist them to realize that actually, if they're just fully present with whatever they're doing, that's meditation. So you're doing it already.
All right. So, should we go to the next question, or do you want to elaborate? Next question. So, next question. So, with these questions, guys, we've got 2 left or so. Attention to a person. All right. So, otherwise, we'll be here for another hour, which is good, but I want to be respectful of your time.
You know, it's like that.
Okay, whoever feels the most competent can answer my question. It is about the intersection, the interface between the nervous system and mental health, just what this lady mentioned, which I would like to elaborate a little bit, and maybe we can go deeper, especially to the point when you have someone who, because of a nervous system breakdown, has an issue with their mental health and is kind of in a loop, in a cycle of bad decisions. I mean, we see this maybe with drug addicts, stuff like that. We don't necessarily need to go this extreme, but where do you see the interface between the nervous system and external influences as well as internal influences, and how does it influence the mental health level of a person, and what do you do if someone is severely impacted by a nervous system breakdown?
Okay, that's a great question. I would say that if a person has got to a place when they're hypersensitive or they become hypervigilant. So that's probably because of an overstimulated amygdala. So that's the fight-flight response in the brain that is a bit like our danger sensor. So if a person has been exposed to something that's been very very intense or difficult, then and early on in their life, it's going to prime the brain to overreact instantly all the time, because it's not the incoming information is not being processed in the way that it's supposed to through the hypothalamus, and to be able to read the information and interpret it properly. So that's when we have a traumatized brain. And so, in that case, then of course the whole nervous system is going to be impacted, because it's going to be in a sympathetic mode all the time. It doesn't know how to regulate itself. The person cannot know how to regulate itself because the brain is traumatized. So we need to go back to the body through very specific exercises to retrain the traumatized brain to to send new signals. The signals will be the parasympathetic signals, right? So if we're going to be doing like vagal nerve stimulation or other self-regulation exercises or craniosacral therapy, or there's different types of therapies that's going to be focused on the body, right, on regulating the body in that respect. So to rewire the person's affected brain, because it's at the brain level that we're actually seeing this activity taking place. So telling the person to just calm down, everything's okay, they can't do it because they're in a state of hypervigilance. So we need to work. We have to work to help them to rewire that through different practices. Yeah, and breathworking is included in this as well. Yeah.
And what happens when this severe impact is happening, right? Like when the amygdala is firing and it is all basically in fight or flight mode, how do you handle such a person sensitively when you have to face it?
Great. I suppose that when a person is in that moment, that they're actually very, very triggered, there's not a lot that you can actually do. The person's going to go through through that crisis moment. But what you can actually do after, once the person is a little bit more settled, then you're able to actually explain a little bit what's happening. That's giving information like that and explaining that there's a logical reason for the experience they're having can be very helpful. It can increase their locus of control. That means a locus of understanding that, oh, there's a mechanism that I didn't understand before. It almost the person will almost feel as if it's something happening to them that they have no control over. Yes, it's deeply visceral, that it's deeply unconscious. It's become primed, like a learned helplessness, if you like. But with giving the information and the mechanism of what's happening for them can be really helpful. Plus, teaching them very specific exercises, like the ones we've already mentioned. Doesn't have to be so sophisticated. Sometimes just a abdominal breathing exercise can be really effective. And it's how you transmit this knowledge. It's not just tell them breathe. I mean, I know a lot of psychiatrists or psychologists just do a breathing exercise. And I often see so many people who come to see me and said, well, I've tried all these. They never work. I said, okay, would you be willing to try something with me now together? Let's try and do something together. And then just go through the process with them. They will then be able to understand the language because it becomes felt. A felt experience. Just giving them the information is not enough, if that makes sense, right? So there's, I hope I'm answering you.
100%. Yeah. Or maybe I can ask a follow-up question later on.
Yeah, thank you, Max. Last question. There was one more, I think. Or was that it? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I want to talk about burnouts. In burnouts, I identify that there are two influences, like influences that we, put on ourselves, but also external, maybe work, maybe stress, maybe deadlines and stuff. So I'm sure you've been consulting these sort of patients. I'd like just to hear maybe each of your thoughts on this issue, which I feel is very current.
So it's about burnout and how we deal with burnout, because it is definitely something that many people experience for many reasons. But maybe you'd like to give an answer.
Sure. Yeah. No. So with when I've worked with people who have experienced burnout, what I tend to do is it's almost like. As I was listening to someone the other day, taking them on a pilgrimage, you go backwards in order to then move forwards. So looking at where the pattern of overcompensating is coming from, and looking at their self-esteem or low self-esteem, and working with those aspects in order to start to address the root, or one of the roots of where burnout comes from. So that's how I work with people. Yeah.
So I see quite a lot of people with burnout, and there's many reasons for that. A lot of different pressures that are there that will often lead to the person thinking that they have to perform. And they have a lot of expectations. Maybe they have the tendency to be perfectionists, and they're not really meeting their standards, but also in living in a world where there's a lot of demand, for maybe meeting one's KPIs, and depending on type of maybe environment you're living in, if it's or working in, if it's very stressful, or living in, it's very stressful, and so that can drive a person to not to be disconnected, meaning to not really pay attention to check in with themselves. Am I okay? Am I fine? To have a different type of self-talk will be something that I often see is not there. There's a complete neglect to that, because the only thing that matters is getting that KPI and meeting that need, that demand, whether it's set personally or whether it's set because of the environment that they're in. So helping the person to break all these pieces down to make more sense of what's going on is the type of work that I do. So this is coming from a cognitive behavioral therapy type of background. So which is a type of therapy which is really about exploring your thinking, exploring your lifestyle, exploring your behavior, to explain a little bit how everything is connected there. But I will also integrate other modalities. So I integrate various modalities. I might integrate hypnotherapy. I might integrate biofeedback. I might integrate acceptance and commitment therapy. I might include various other evidence-based modalities that can be really, really helpful to the person to share that information in the right time, in the right way, in the right moment, so that they are also in a space where they can talk and share what they need to share. So it's not just teaching a person or telling them what to do. It's just being able to listen, to have so the person has a space to be able to feel heard and understood, and then passing the message, passing the different messages there to work around these issues such as burnout.
Thank you for the question, brother. I know we can go on for so much information tonight. Remember that the whole YouTube, Instagram Live, SpeakuP Monday Live, Robert Ian Bonnick Live, or YouTube, this whole episode is on. I think in our library we've got almost 300, the last 300 out of 473 episodes. So if you want to know any more, just send me a message and I can tell you where they are. But it's SpeakuP Monday, right? And then you'll find one for Health Hub Bali that will have this included in it. So there'll be number 39 or something, I guess. But two very quick questions, and then we'll wrap it up. So why come to Bali? To reset and restore, and the importance of trained professionals, which I think the trained professional ones, I think we've hit that one. So I think it's one question: why come to Bali? To reset and restore.
Well, Bali is a really special place, right? Why Bali? Simply because I think just because of the nature and the environment that it has, maybe not where we are right now, but this kind of tropical environment, a place that's far away from your usual daily environment, wherever you are in the world, and can be really conducive to that type of healing. Which I would say works really well. But I'd like to also say something about the trained professional. One more thing about that very quickly is that I see here in Indonesia a lot of professionals who are not necessarily trained, right? And
I'm just going to disappear for a moment, which you never do, but I'm going to do because we can. So please continue. I'll be back very shortly.
All right. Okay. All right. So one of the things that I do is I teach health professionals accredited trainings. So anybody who's actually interested in, for example, specializing in eating disorders, I actually teach an accredited course that is approved by the British Psychological Society, and that's for people who are always seeking as professionals, because to maintain your professional status, you always need to keep up with, in England we call it your CPD, your continued professional development. In the US, it's your continued education, and in medicine, it's CME, so continued medical experience, I think it is, or something, or education. question. And so this is kind of high-level courses where I transmit this knowledge in an in an integrative way on how to actually work with specific conditions. So I think that's really important. I just want to highlight that. And yes, in terms of Bali, I think Bali just has a beautiful place to be able to do this integrative healing. I think that with the Health Hub, it's a wonderful opportunity to really bring together opportunities for people to be able to heal with through people that are qualified. And that you can feel safe with, because with the Health Hub, they're going through such a thorough process of working closely with ministries as well, to kind of be able to bring together what has been lacking in many respects, and so it's become a little bit and to be able to standardize something that can offer something of quality and that will be serving a purpose of healing for the people who are suffering. So.
Yeah, and I think also just going on from what you said, Jeremy, around Health Hub Bali, is it's providing an integrated approach, which is so important. So one's looking at the whole being rather than just in parts. The other thing I think around Bali is all of you are here in Bali. Something's drawn you here. Bali is a very, very special place. Yes, the nature. Yes, the culture. The energetic of this island is quite extraordinary. And I think when you come to Bali, there is so much that will support you, not just in the environment and just with the professionals that you may end up working with the food, even with the air here and the water here. There is something, very magical about Bali. And if you allow it to, it will really facilitate and support your healing process. And it's known for healing of the heart. Actually, is one of the things that Bali is really, really well known for. So, and apparently the electromagnetic field is much closer here when you walk. So that's why Bali is a really good place to come to. Just pick your area. That's all. Tracy, I guess.
Okay. So why Bali? What I'd like to address are the two questions from Max and the other friend here on the burnout.
Burnout, yes.
Very similar questions, and they tie in with the other lady's question talking about the Chinese medicine. What we're talking about is the parasympathetic nervous system. Why we're saying Bali, in the past we've said if you have a diagnosis, immediately the trigger and the fear sets in. Choices and knowledge, like standard. Happening in our body. This is why coming to Bali, having access to testing, getting baselines, and then having ones that can create that journey for you to unwind some of the things. And then from the Chinese medicine perspective, we're looking at the kidney with the burnout, and then people, like the minute they stop looking outside, like what was explained, and they come inside and actually make conscious choices about life and realise that they can, we create a different thing in the amygdala, which you're talking about. Because if we've got cancer or any disease, 85% is emotional. What's driving is the fear, and when things metastasise, you've got all the neurotransmitters, and it's like a crazy loop that's happening. But to neutralise that requires knowledge, and that's what we're giving here through, first of all, the testing, then the information, and then what treatment options you've got. The minute you have an option, you don't just have like a death sentence or something, you can start making choices, and then it's up to you what you do with that. And that's what the support we have in Bali, and these are the Balinese will support that. On the global thing with tourism, global tourism, we've had to speak there. And why Bali? There's something here that no other tourist destination can offer, and that's in the Balinese. That's in their soul. And they will give the support they want to. So that's why we're saying Bali, especially for mental and emotional health. What we're doing is giving them the support in a professional way that we can bring some structure, and that's with the Medical Tourism Association. that you can then feel safe with some very severe situations, and we can reset, restore, reverse aging, reverse disease. Yeah.
Beautiful. So long session, everybody. I think one of the longest episodes for a little while. But again, very key, very important. And the fact that you're all still here now, intently listening and watching, kind of tells us the importance of this episode. So once again, I just want to say that it is available online. Go to YouTube. You'll go SpeakuP Monday, Health Hub Bali, and you'll see it there. About 10 minutes after this is done, you'll actually see it there already. If you're stuck, contact Health Hub Bali. So Health Hub Bali, and that's again for all the usual social media. We spoke about social media tonight, but social media channels from Instagram to Facebook, and the website Health Hub Bali as well. All right. So I just want to thank the Tropical Nomad team, my technical partner Guzman and Hadis, who's around here somewhere. Thank you very much. Thank you to the audience that came. Remember, Tropical Nomad is open for 24 hours a day. Doesn't mean that you should stay for 24 hours, but you can if you want. What we're going to do after this is we're going to have a photograph with 4 of us, and then we're going to invite all of you to come up and be in this photo, which somehow we'll manage to make work. And then remember that you have a QR code over here. Thank you very much, Vina, for setting it up. That is to join. It's a one-way bulletin that keeps you in touch with what's happening on a weekly basis, and of course, Health Hub Bali and all the events which are coming up in the next period of time. And finally, I want to thank to our guests. Thank you so much indeed. What a session. I think if it was a lemon, I think there's a lot of juice.
Oh yeah, I think
has
so.
come out tonight.
Yes,
a lot of juice. So thank you so much, please. So a round of applause for yourselves, Health Hub Bali, and our special guests. Thank you very much, everybody. See you next week.